Hello and welcome to the 18th episode, episode of PEMpodcast, the Psychic Eye Mystery Podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie, with my fabulous sister, Sandy, coming to you on a Friday afternoon. How's the weather over where you are? It's freaking freezing cold here and windy and just shitty. I'm tired of shitty weather.
It's classic New England. It goes from being balmy and humid to cold, and then back to being, I don't know, partly sunny, then rain. Like it's
just, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute and it changes. Here it's just been like, I went for a run today and it was so windy. It was like 22-mile-an-hour winds and it was great going out, but coming back, I was like, it was in my face. And all I kept thinking was like, I just want to go to Hawaii.
Right.
I just want to go to Hawaii.
Oh, well, man. Picking up on the egg story.
For those of you who are just joining us and did not hear about the egg story,
listen to last week's podcast.
Listen to last week's podcast. Going to get even with the guy who was giving her a lot of trouble and was going to egg his car with one egg that she lobbed at 5:30 in the morning, dressed in black, very covert. And was careful not to put any fingerprints on the eggshell just in case, the crime of the century got back to area police, and she missed the car.
I did. So epic fail number one. Epic fail number two is that I had to have my driveway redone, and in the process there were a lot of rocks that ended up being unearthed to create a new space in my driveway, and the contractor was frustrated that there were so many boulders because it cost him money to dispose of the boulders. So he left a couple of bigger rocks in my yard. And I thought, okay, maybe I could
to run into. That's
pretty
good.
much. Could maybe use them for landscaping or whatever. So I noticed yesterday that my neighbor across the street is having a whole new rock wall put in. And I'm like, awesome. I'll just take my extra rocks and contribute. Right. So I managed to
let them know.
No, it's completely dark. Yeah, it was stealth. It's completely dark out. I'm again dressed in black from a workout.
Oh my God.
And nobody's got lights on, right?
And I'm
like, okay, maybe I can stealthily move some of these rocks over. So I picked up like 4 or 5 and they were smaller and kind of created them in the discarded rock pile. And then the big one. And I'm trying to lift it up and I can't. And then I'm rolling it. And I'm like, I'm going to look like an idiot rolling this across the street.
See, so you would be the person that would be rolling it across the street
and get hit by a car. Get hit by a car. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I didn't risk it. It's now sitting on the curb of my property line, waiting.
Just take a sledgehammer and,
Well, that would be your way of dealing with things. Mine is like,
right. I know. Let's smash this. It's a workout. That would be, yes, I could definitely do that. Oh, Lord. Sandy and I were talking yesterday. We were talking about our grandmother, who was just this extraordinary woman. She had 6 kids. And she had cancer in her mid-50s. So uterine, it was uterine cancer, and it spread to her brain. And this was back in the early 1960s. So she just never stood a chance, unfortunately. But one of my aunts has said several times that our grandmother would do 45 minutes of calisthenics every morning. And I told Sandy this, and she's like, that's where you get it. Like, yeah, that's where I get it from. Mm-hmm. So anyway, wow, we have Sans and I have discussed this case in depth. It's super interesting. It's a super interesting case from so many points of view. And the hard part is, like, there's just no justice, but in a lot of these cases, there's no justice. That's why we do them, right?
Yeah.
But this one in particular, just, man, it's a gut punch, I'll tell you. But before we get to that, let's talk books. So this is from the Ghost Hunter Mystery series that I wrote. There are 10 books in this series. This was my darker version. So Abby's like not light and fun, but she's funny and a little lighter. This is like diving into a little bit of the occult a little bit more. So MJ is a medium, and she is with her best friend Gilly and her, I think, husband in this book, or fiance. in this book. They are investigating a possession, a man who is possessed. And they set up cameras to watch him because his life is basically being ruined by whatever spirit is coming into him. And of course, the cameras spy him leaving the townhouse where he lives and returning an hour later covered in blood. So he is the brother of MJ's former love fiance. So her former love has moved on, is engaged to be married. This woman's brother is the subject of the book. So this book, actually, when I was writing it, I'd never gotten creeped out writing any of the MJ stories. It just was like, and this particular novel, I remember I was sitting in the living room and it was pitch black outside. This is kind of, I think it was like January, February timeframe. So it was dark early, and I'm writing, I'm on deadline, trying to kick out the pages. And there's a text that comes in and I don't recognize the number. It's from an unknown number. And it's creepy, right? It's kind of like, you can't figure out who this is, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm writing, about possession in this really creepy scene and this text. And I kept asking, like, who are you? And they wouldn't identify themselves. That's when I stopped writing these at night. I'm like, I will, when the sun is shining. Yeah, and it ended up being a friend of mine that I hadn't connected with in a very long time. And boy, did I give her shit about it, because
she's no longer a friend.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she turned into a friend of me pretty quick. So this is a nice, creepy, if you like a little bit of a darker story, this might be up your alley. So The Ghoul Next Door by Victoria Laurie. Sold everywhere books are sold. Do I have a fantastic anecdote this week? So I've told you a little bit. So I did a reading for a woman, and this was, like, I think my favorite reading that I've done. Truly, this was just an extraordinary reading. So this woman, I guess I'd read a year and a half ago, I'm not quite sure, but she had said, you told me my mom would be crossing over in March, and she did. She crossed over in March. And she's like, I just want to know that my mom is okay. Now, normally I'm like, okay, they just got over there. I don't know if I'm going to end up on the tilt-a-whirl because they're trying to still get their sea legs. I don't know how this will go, but kind of immediately upon her coming onto my screen comes this energy, right? And it was fine. And her mother was so joyous to be freed from a body that was just failing, and she'd been in hospice for a couple of weeks, and she'd been mute, and she really couldn't eat. And so the first thing she told me was that she was reunited with her sister. And my client said, well, she didn't have a sister. I'm like, sister-in-law. She had a sister-in-law, sister figure. She's like, yes, my aunt, her sister-in-law, they were best friends. And I said, well, she's showing me a table, right, with tears levels covered in cupcakes and brownies and cookies and cake and cupcakes. And that was their thing. They loved to bake treats for each other. So I loved that when this woman crossed over, there was this big kind of display, this woman had been baking, waiting for her beloved sister to cross. So that was the first thing she encountered. And then this spirit was so full of energy and joy, just because she could keep moving, because she could move, and she was limber and nothing hurt. And in my mind's eye, she did a cartwheel, like literally she did. I've never had a spirit do a cartwheel before, but she did a cartwheel. So I told this to my client, she just laughed. And I said, your mother, I heard somewhere over the rainbow, right? Which, okay, that's, simple for like crossing, right? So I said, your mother is very grateful to you because you helped her get over the rainbow, cross the rainbow. And she goes, oh my God, Victoria, our funeral's next week. And the song we're going to play is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Right.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty amazing. And then I said, your mom's showing me a piano. Who plays the piano? This mom was an accomplished pianist. So I said, well, she's going to communicate through songs that have a lot of piano music in them. And I said, so like Josh Groban. And immediately after I said that, this woman goes like, not him, the bubble guy. So I go, oh, Michael Bublé. She goes, I have a whole playlist of Michael Bublé songs, right? She loves Michael Bublé. So I'd forgotten he even played the piano, the bubble guy. I thought that was hilarious.
Well, he also does that soda seltzer. But
You know, I don't watch TV commercials.
okay. Well, he's yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So he's big into bubbles, seltzer. I get it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But he's kind of the spokesperson for a specific, I can't think of the name of the soda line or seltzer line, but it's like Bublé or Bubbly.
Oh, gotcha. And then she kept talking about there was going to be a birthday centered around a pool, and it was going to be a pool party, and the mother was planning on attending. So I said, we'll take a lot of pictures at whoever's this birthday is. I said, I feel like it's in June. She goes, that's my birthday. She goes, we have a pool outside. Right. So they're going to do a pool party around the pool. Mom's going to be there. And I said, take a lot of pictures because I think your mom is going to try and show up. Now, this doesn't mean like an apparition. This means like a little orb. So if you're missing someone and it's a special event, take a lot of pictures. And if you see like a little green, blue kind of orb bouncing around, it's not a reflection. It's actually a little spirit saying hello. And then this woman from the other side, this mom, was talking about how beautiful heaven is, how beautiful the other side is. And she gave me just a tiny little window peek into it. And she showed me in my mind's eye a sequoia. And it turns out my client's sister goes to the, I don't know where the sequoias are. They're up in Northern California.
Yeah, the redwood forest, I think.
Yeah,
aren't they?
Yeah, she goes up there all the time. California. Sequoias are like her thing, which I thought was really interesting. So the mom was like, the trees are all sequoia height. They're all huge. They're all enormous. And the feeling that I had was like the sky was the color of a beautiful sunrise or sunset, sort of like that pinky purple. And I felt like the sun basically like was never directly overhead. It was kind of always dawn or dusk, kind of feeling, almost like a twilighty kind of look to it, and I don't know, because this was just a tiny little window that was opened up to the other side. But what I saw of it was just rolling, beautiful green hills, trees all the size of sequoias, this beautiful pink, dusty rose kind of sky. And all I kept thinking was like, I want to go to there.
Not yet, please.
Yeah. So then to identify her sister, to make sure that she was identifying her sister-in-law, I asked my client, I'm like, what's the deal with Ireland? Who came from Ireland? Well, her sister-in-law came from Ireland. So just a ton of proof of I'm here, I'm with so-and-so. Life is fantastic. I'm joyous. And the last thing she left me with, which I thought was really adorable, my client asked, what can I do to honor my mom at her funeral? And her mom started to talk about, a song that mixed partying with dancing. She wanted everybody to party and have a good time. She was like, no tears, nobody's sad, just play, really good dance music. So celebrate good times. That was it. She put celebrate good times in my head. So from her standpoint, from the mom's standpoint, it is celebrating good times. She's made it across, and she's, wonderful, and isn't sick anymore, isn't old anymore, can eat all the treats she wants. And that was another line she threw out at me. She was like, over here, you can eat anything you want and never gain weight.
Well, that's like someone I know that has crossed that communicated artisan pizza over here. I'm fine. I got artisan pizza over here. And I
Right?
was like, does that mean this person's eating pizza? Like, really? Pizza?
Yeah. Apparently
Yeah.
you can eat as much as you want and never
Yeah.
gain weight
Yeah.
because you pick your own, silhouette. So
I need to get there right now. I'm just saying.
That's kind of an extreme
Where's
diet.
my ticket?
Yes, crossing over to get thin.
And eat whatever I want.
Yeah, that's a way for John Edward to make money, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's true.
crossing over to get thin.
You can be as fat as you want here because you're going to be thin there.
Because over there, calories don't matter. They don't count. You can pack it on. You can eat anything that you want over there. So that was a glimpse into the other side that was so rich with detail. And I've never had a spirit show it to me like that before. So I felt just so blessed to have had this woman come to me and ask for a reading to connect with her mom, because it was just I don't remember my readings. Like I never remember that one. I remember, and I'm going to remember because it was really extraordinary. It was really amazing. So yeah.
It is true that you never, it is true that you don't remember readings, because when you give them to me, I'm like, don't you remember when you said, and now I've just learned to not even say that to you.
Right. You remember when you said blah, blah, blah? No, you still say it. You remember
I do.
when I'm like, no.
Makes me feel so loved.
But there, I don't know a psychic that does hold on to those. John Edward says they're borrowed thoughts. They are borrowed. It's kind of like you're just sort of the telephone. It's not like the telephone has an answering machine, a recording. So it just kind of comes through and off it goes. But right after that reading, I wrote down everything I could remember because it was so special. Yeah, it was just really amazing. It was really amazing. So much proof that she was observing her family, that she was had so much joy and was, not at peace. It's so interesting to me when people ask, is, so-and-so at peace? And I'm like, no, they're out doing a jig.
Well, I mean,
they're partying.
The statement, rest in peace. If they've suffered or they've been unhappy or having a difficult time, you want them to be okay on the other side. I think that's what that is supposed to mean.
Right?
Not literally resting in peace. Yeah.
Right. But for me, it's always been this sort of passive, you cross over and you're like passive,
You're an angel just floating above.
Listening to harp music, right? Like stupid.
My wings and cherubs.
Yes, exactly. Floating on a cloud,
right? That's why I'm not fat, because I'm floating on a cloud and wings. And
like, someone had asked actually, and I thought it was a really great question on, I think our last podcast, someone had asked, are Christians with Christians and Jews with Jews and Protestants with Protestants, like, are there separate kind of things? And the biggest thing that I can tell you is that side, we mirror that side. So if we go to a Catholic church and we belong to a Catholic church, that's where I have this thing that's like not supposed to like, right? This whole contraption, and I keep hitting it. So if you are, very religious in a Catholic sense, and you love baby Jesus and not adult Jesus, and you love the Jesus, that's where you go. You go to hang with all the other Jesus lovers. And if you're Jewish, you go to hang with all the Jewish people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think it's like you're locked in. I think just the way that we go to church and then we intermingle with everybody else socially, I think that's exactly what happens on the other side as well. So just always remember that our world is a mirror for there, without the murder, violence, hate, oppression, poverty, sickness, illness, pain, hunger. But so we mirror there.
Yeah. We get all the bonus stuff.
Right? Greenhouse gases, no greenhouse gases in heaven.
No methane.
Yeah, no methane.
All right.
Oh, hilarious. Okay. So take it away. This case is so freaking, it's so layered. It's crazy.
Okay. Build it up a little more, please, so I can disappoint in the process.
Stop.
All right. So This is
Go ahead.
about this week's case is about the investor passenger murders. 40 years have passed since the massacre of 8 people on a fishing boat called the Investor, making this unsolved mystery the largest mass murder in Alaskan history. On September 6, 1982, in a tiny fishing village harbor in Craig, Alaska, 8 people, including Mark Colhurst and his pregnant wife Irene, both aged 28, their 2 children, Kimberly, age 5, and John, age 4, and 4 teenage deckhands, Chris Heyman, aged 18, Mike Stewart, Jerome Kawan, and Dave Moon, all age 19, were all shot to death aboard a fishing boat named the Investor. Shortly after their lives ended, to destroy any incriminating evidence, the killer returned to the crime scene on the afternoon of September 7th and set the boat on fire. Although this case is officially closed and a primary suspect was put on trial twice, no one is serving time for these tragic murders. Who performed these senseless executions and why remains a mystery. Based in Blaine, Washington, Mark Colhurst was a hardworking and well-respected go-getter who dreamed of retiring at age 50. He had started fishing in his early 20s and was quite skilled at it, periodically earning 6 figures for his large bounties. But Mark also had a cocky attitude and a quick temper, which occasionally resulted in fisticuffs. Shortly before the final days of the commercial fishing season on September 5th, 1982, Mark and his crew arrived in Craig, Alaska, which had a very small population of only 575 people. And they were aboard the Investor, which was one of the most expensive high-tech commercial fishing boats of its kind in the region. That Labor Day weekend, the sleepy town of Craig was booming with commercial fishermen, all clamoring for space in the tiny port located off the west coast of Prince Wales Island. The state-of-the-art Investor stood out among the various fishing vessels pulling into port to unload their catch, in part because of its largesse, but also because the Investor had tied a broom to her mast, indicating that the crew had made a clean sweep with their catch. Upon pulling into the E.C. Phillips cold storage dock, Mark and his crew were triumphant over the 77,000-pound catch of salmon, which was valued at about $33,000. Given that the port was overcrowded with fishing boats, the Investor had to tie up next to the Decade, which was tied to the Defiance, which was moored to the dock. And despite such close quarters, the port had a festive, boisterous energy about it, with everyone celebrating the end of the fruitful fishing season. Glad to have a night off, the Investor's 4 teenage deckhands headed into port. Michael, Mark's cousin, and Chris, the son of one of Mark's good friends, took off together to get something to eat, and longtime crewman Jerome and his friend Dave, who had just joined the Investor in early August, headed into town to grab a bite, call home, and buy some weed. The Colhursts were excited to celebrate their bounty, as well as Mark's 28th birthday. So Mark, his wife, and high school sweetheart Irene, and their 2 children, Kimberly and John, headed to Ruth Ann's for dinner. Over dinner, Mark and Irene talked about Irene's plans to return home to Blaine, Washington the next day with their 2 children so that the kids could get ready to start school after the long holiday weekend. Despite having unloaded a significant bounty earlier that day, Mark had to borrow $100 from a friend to cover his dinner, as Mark preferred to be paid in a lump sum with a check at the end of the season for his total receipts. As the restaurant was nearing close and tables were being cleared, a waitress witnessed a man enter the restaurant and quickly engaged Mark in a verbal argument. From there, Mark and his family returned to the Investor at around 9:30 in the evening, just as a storm had begun to form. At about 10:30, 4-year-old John, who bunked in the steering room, stuck his head out of the pilot house to say hello to a crewman on the Decade. That was the last time anyone in port would see the young boy alive. Hours later, according to police, a killer crept onto the Investor in the darkness of the stormy night and executed his victims, several of whom investigators believe were shot in their bunks in quick succession with either a .22 caliber pistol or rifle. Around 6 a.m. the following morning, the unidentified gunman, waving nonchalantly to a nearby skipper, captained the 58-foot, $850,000 Investor a mile out of Craig to the secluded bay of nearby Fish Egg Island. Once anchored, the killer attempted to sink the yacht by allowing seawater to flood the engine cooling system. He then motored back to Craig and docked the Investor's skiff. When the Investor was still afloat the next day, the killer returned that afternoon with a can of gasoline and set the Investor ablaze, reducing the crime scene and the bodies of the dead to charred ash. The fire quickly engulfed the ship, making it impossible for other vessels to try and save anyone aboard. It took more than 4 hours to control the flames enough so that the authorities could board the smoldering ruin and confirm that there weren't any survivors. Extinguishing the fire ultimately took 2 full days and was finally put out on September 8th. Troopers soon found some of the victims, all burned beyond recognition. Dental records confirmed the remains of Mark, his wife Irene, and daughter Kimberly, and Mark's cousin Michael Stewart. The coroner had determined that Mark and Irene had each been shot several times, with Mark suffering multiple gunshot wounds to the face. 2 days later, investigators found more human remains, bones, teeth, and a torso, and speculated, although never positively identified, that these were the remains of crew members Dean Moon, Jerome Cohen, and Chris Heyman. No remains were ever found of Mark's son, John, who was 4 years old. They think that he may have been sleeping in the area hardest hit by the fire, the steering room, where the fire likely accelerated with a gas stove explosion. The coroner also found that the victims had died before the intentionally set fire, as there were no carbon monoxide in their lungs. Blood alcohol tests suggested that the adults were drunk and that Dean and Jerome were also high on marijuana. Police circulated a description of the man witnesses say they saw shuttling back and forth between the investor and the harbor on the investor skiff before vanishing after the boat was ablaze. The man in question was about 150 pounds, a white male in his early 20s with a pockmarked face, wearing a baseball cap and glasses. It took nearly 2 years before police arrested 23-year-old John Peel in his hometown of Bellingham, Washington, based upon his similarity to the description of the suspect, but no witness could definitively confirm that John was the driver of the investor skiff. John had once worked for Mark in 1980 and even dated Mark's sister for a brief period of time. But because John was often late and somewhat lazy, Mark fired John from his crew for alleged drinking and drug abuse. Bad blood between the two men ensued, and at the beginning of the summer of 1982, John, anxious to find work as a crewman, made his way from Washington to Ketchikan, Alaska, where he met up with Mark. When Mark turned down John's request for a ride to Craig, John ended up pawning his watch to secure plane fare to Craig. And fortunately, he was able to join the crew of the Libby 8, which was captained by Larry Demarant Jr. At the time of the murders, the Libby 8 was moored right behind the investor. When interviewed by police, John claimed to be asleep aboard the Libby 8, although his alibi could not be confirmed by Larry Demarant. As police mapped their timeline of the events surrounding the night of September 5th, they discovered that John was the person that sold weed to Jerome and Dean during their visit to shore. Police theorized that John, Jerome, and Dean all returned to the investor and continued to party following dinner at Ruth Ann's, where they were joined by the Colhurst family along with Chris Heyman and Mike Stewart. Larry Demarant reported that at about 2 a.m., he heard a scream and the sound of several pops. And when he went to investigate the noise, he saw a man aboard the investor carrying a rifle and wearing a baseball cap. Police believe that around that time, Mark and John got into a heated argument that quickly escalated, and John shot and killed all 8 passengers of the investor. Following the murders, police believe John motored the investor to nearby Fish Egg Island Bay in hopes of quickly sinking the boat by opening the butterfly valves. To make a quick escape, John allegedly stripped the hydraulic system while deploying the investor's skiff and motored to EC Cold Storage, where he disembarked to make new travel arrangements to leave the area. He had originally been scheduled to leave Craig with the crew of the Libby 8. Hours later, when the investor remained buoyant, John allegedly purchased 25 gallons of gas and used the skiff to return to the fishing yacht and set it on fire. Despite their theory, there was no physical evidence tying John to the murders. The case against him was largely circumstantial. However, prosecutors were able to secure an indictment against John Peel following a grand jury hearing. During his 1986 trial, prosecutors noted that John had failed a polygraph test, and they focused their case on the fact that there had been bad blood between Mark and John. The prosecution's theory was that John, angered at being fired, flew into a rage and shot everyone aboard the investor and used the fire to cover up his crime. Damning testimony came from skipper Larry Demarant, as he stated that he saw John aboard the investor on the night of the killings, and another witness said he sold John Peel gas hours before the fire. John's attorneys promoted the idea that it was possible someone else could have committed the crimes, perhaps a hired killer or a crewman whose body was never identified. They promoted this idea that only an experienced gunman could successfully murder 8 people with a .22 caliber rifle, as the rifle would have had to have been reloaded during the shooting spree, and he would have had to have had the ability to subdue his male victims as he went about the killings. Craig, Alaska's former police chief, was convinced the killings were the result of a drug deal gone bad. Quote, "I've heard a lot of talk about a drug boat," explained Shapley, who spent days sifting through the ashes of the investor for bone fragments and teeth. They say Craig floated on drugs in those days. 6 months of testimony and 6 days of deliberations resulted in a hung jury and a mistrial. John Peel's second trial began in January of 1988, making it the state's longest running prosecution, and at $2 million, it's also the most expensive. The second trial consisted of 3 months of testimony and 4 days of deliberation that ended up acquitting John. 2 years after his acquittal, John Peel filed a $177 million civil suit against the state of Alaska for wrongful prosecution. 7 years later, he settled for a reported $900,000, a sum that he largely needed to help cover his legal fees. Believing that they caught the right guy, Alaska state troopers considered the case closed and are no longer looking for the killer. They got the right guy, McNeil says. Just because someone is acquitted doesn't mean they're innocent. It just means there's not enough evidence to show guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. My sources for this story include People Magazine Investigates, Murder at Sea, People Explains, The Mystery of Who Massacred 8, including a family on a fishing boat in Alaska by Johnny Dodd and Adam Carlson, December 11th, 2017. People.com, Exonerated Suspect in Unsolved Alaska Fishing Boat, Mass Murder Breaks His Silence by Johnny Dodd, December 8th, 2017. New York Daily News, Massacre on a Fishing Boat, and There Was Never a Conviction, Mara Bofson, 3/31/19, and then The Investor Massacre, 8 Souls on Board, True Crime Podcast, Gray Area 2020. So I think it's pretty clear who the culprit was.
Yeah, Peel.
Peel.
100% it was Peel. It wasn't a drug deal gone bad. It wasn't any of that. So let's start from the beginning. Okay, from the very beginning when Mark fires John Peel. I believe that he fired John because John was, I did an automatic writing on this, Sands, and the thing that stood out to me when I was picking the brain of my crew on the other side was that they said John was upset, furious because of the lost income and lost opportunity, and the opportunity had this flavor of drugs associated with it. So I think what he was doing was using the front of being this deckhand to actually deal drugs in every port that they stopped in. And I think I think Mark was like, I have this $850,000 boat. It's my whole life savings. The Coast Guard comes in, finds drugs here, they confiscate my boat, get the fuck off. So I think that was the source of the rift between the two people. And when John wanted a ride to that island in Alaska, what is it, Craig?
So yeah, when he wanted to go from Ketchikan to Craig,
right.
And Mark
John was
turned
like,
him down.
no way.
Mark was
Mark
no
was
way.
like, no way,
Yeah.
because I always get that mixed up. Mark was like, absolutely not, because he knows that this is going to be Labor Day weekend, and there will definitely be Coast Guard patrolling the waters, looking for trouble.
Especially
Police.
since the fishing season was going to close
Right.
that weekend. So you can't fish. And I think that's probably
Right.
partly why it was so heavily patrolled.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, Mark didn't want this shit anywhere near his boat. This is his most expensive boat in the whole harbor. And they would, if they found drugs on that boat, confiscated, done. He can't get it back. It's gone. So, and he could be prosecuted. So I don't think he wanted John anywhere near his boat. He goes to dinner, birthday celebration. He and Irene have too much to drink. I think that they went back to the boat. I can't decide whether Mark stayed up or went to bed with Irene. I believe the kids went to bed. I believe Irene went to bed. I kind of feel that Mark went to bed as well because everybody was drunk. That's kind of what I feel. And then he woke up at some point because the party was ongoing on the deck. So you had Jerome and Dean and John, right, on the deck,
Yes.
and they're partying.
Yeah.
So my thinking is Mark went to sleep, right? Jerome, Dean, and John come back. It's late.
It's actually Dave. Sorry.
Oh, it's Dave.
Jerome,
Sorry.
Dave. Yeah.
Dave
and John come back.
Back, right? It's late, probably after midnight, and they continue to party. Mark wakes up, sees John on the boat, and is like, get the fuck off my boat. And an argument ensues. They go down below deck, and John, he knew he'd purchased this rifle, right? Shotgun.
Actually, it was Jerome that purchased the rifle that they think it was on board. He had purchased a 22 caliber rifle at the same time that John Peel had purchased a 30-30 gun, and they bought it from the same gun distributor a year earlier. So John would have been aware of
Right.
Jerome's gun.
Right. And where to get it and where to find it and where the ammo was and everything else. It was probably because there were kids on board, was probably locked up, was
Yeah.
probably in a cabinet somewhere. Right.
My
So-
understanding is the police, when they boarded after the four hours of the fire burning, they did find a
Mhm.
rifle there in a
Mhm.
cabinet.
Mhm. So he put it back after he, got done blowing everybody up. So Mark goes downstairs. Maybe he goes downstairs to get the gun. John follows him, right? Definitely to get the gun. Gets the gun. The gun goes off. The two upstairs, Jerome and Dean, Dave, Jerome and Dave, hear that. They think Mark has killed John. They go running downstairs, right? If they were suspicious that John had killed Mark, I don't think that they would have gone running downstairs. I think that they would have run to get help because Mark is not a threat to them, but John could be.
Yeah.
Right. So they go running downstairs and I think that John had just shot. I really felt like Mark got hit in the chest and was killed then. And boom, 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 down the stairs, right? Come the two deckhands, and he just blows them away.
Yeah.
Right? Blows them away. And then I think it was he blocked the exit. There's nowhere for these people to go, right?
From their bunks. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So then it's just a matter of picking them off one by one. So this whole idea that you'd have to subdue these people to murder them is ridiculous because as we know in mass shootings, a gun goes, if someone's got a gun, you go and hide, you find someplace to hide. And I think that John just very methodically went from bunk to bunk to bunk and just killed everybody. I do believe Irene woke up, came out because she heard the first gunshot, screamed. Those were the two pops. I think it was right around the time that the two guys came downstairs as well. And then John just has to reload, which, he's got those bricks, right? The bricks of ammo, and just pop in the cartridge and just take people out one by one. So, and then he's like that, now what? Right now what? So
it's about 2:30 in the morning at this point, from what we think. Yeah.
So like 2 a.m. Right. So now what? He's got to come up with a plan. So you in our discussion made a really good point that he was probably covered in blood. Right. So he's going to take a shower and dispose of his clothes the best that he can. And whose clothes does he grab? He probably grabbed Mark's clothes. And my theory is because the sketch artists, all the sketch artists from the eyewitnesses said that they saw a man with a baseball cap and glasses, right? But John Peel did not wear glasses. So my thinking is that he took Mark's clothing and his glasses, right, and wore the baseball cap to pretend to be Mark, because he was probably the only person on board that had glasses. And so as John is like, well, I've got to get rid of the evidence of this boat because people saw me coming on this boat. As he's sailing it out, right, he lets the lines, the moor lines go, and he pilots the boat over to the
bay.
cove.
Yeah. Yes, I'll get it in a second. But yes, he goes over there.
So he's headed
it's
there.
like around the corner from the port area, basically out of view.
Right. And so this is his master plan, is to sink the boat, right? And he's got to get back to shore. So he's got the skiff. The skiff is right there. And he knows he has to get in the skiff and head back. Well, this is a fishing village, so they're up at the butt crack of dawn. So probably by this time, it's 4 or 5 in the morning. And John is thinking, I have to be in disguise. So he shoots Mark in the face. I think Mark was definitely already dead by this point. Shoots Mark in the face several times to obscure the fact that the glasses are missing. So it's like he's just trying to make the crime scene look a certain way. Right. So if police were like, well, this guy's head is completely blown off, I don't know that they'd be looking for glasses fragments. Right.
Right.
So my theory is that he was, and if you look, there's a photo, if anybody wants to look up, any of the photos of the captain and his wife, he had kind of those square sort of
Yeah.
glasses,
See-through glasses. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And in the 3 sketches that I saw of the eyewitnesses who saw someone powering the skiff, though it looked like those glasses,
Mm.
the kind of the thicker rims, a little
Mhm.
bit on the square side. So, so I think that John was, um, thinking. I think he had several hours, 4 hours to kind of come up with a plan, and this was the plan he came up with. And when he opened up the valves to try and sink the boat, and it's an $850,000 vessel, so it's going to be hard to sink. It
Yeah.
probably has some safety stuff going on, and it doesn't sink. And his only other move is like, well, they can't find these bodies in the conditions that they find them in, and I probably left evidence on the boat as well, right?
Sure.
Maybe his clothes, maybe his blood, maybe something, right? So the other brilliant idea is to buy gasoline and burn it, burn it up. So I just it kills me that no one fingerprinted the skiff.
Mhm.
Like it was just sort of they had to move the skiff. I read somewhere where they had to
They
move the
did.
skiff like
It
4
was in the
times.
way. Yeah, it was in the way when he pulled it into the processing place and docked it and got off and went to make a phone call to a travel agent to see about getting out of
Right?
Craig. That boat was in the way, so he kept having to move it
Mhm.
and until he could figure out like what to do.
Right.
But at this point, people still didn't know that anybody was actually dead on the
Right.
investor.
Right.
And so when the boat caught fire, technically, people thought, oh my God, the boat's on fire. Let's go try and save people.
Right.
Unknowing, had no clue that
Right.
what had happened.
Right. Right. Yeah. And John was thinking, this is good. Everybody's going to think that they went up in a fire,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
probably was not counting on the fact that they would discover that these people had been shot to death, murdered. So, yeah. And the whole thing where I read that John had a plan to take another boat to go back.
Oh
And
yeah.
this was a long-standing kind of
Yep.
arrangement.
He was
And
supposed to go
then,
back with the Libby 8,
yeah,
and he ended up canceling that plan in favor of getting out of Craig within 2 days of the fire. So that was also suspicious. I mean, it was all circumstantial. He
mhm,
had no physical evidence, and the crime scene was so badly burnt
mhm,
that it was difficult to process. I'm pretty
mhm,
sure he had time to wipe down the skiff. Um,
mm,
if he was clever enough to try
yeah,
and disguise himself, and there was time, I'm sure
mhm,
he wiped it down.
mhm. Well, he handled it enough. Do you know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? That
Mhm.
there was still, I think, a chance, because the skiff is kind of it's got seats, it's got the motor, it's got, there's a lot of places where you can pick up a print. And the fact that that they never even thought to fingerprint it. And again, Craig is a small place that, they probably only deal with maybe some drug. I mean, if these guys went into town to buy pot, right?
Mhm.
We know
Mhm.
drugs are there.
Mhm.
So the police probably, the biggest thing that they dealt with maybe was a rape. It's a town of 575 people. They probably had never been a murder there, much less 8, much less a crime scene that's up in smoke
Right.
for days. Um,
Right.
so yeah, they were, I think, overwhelmed by the circumstance. And John, I think, just took, man, I think he just lucked out at every fucking turn.
Well, what really galls me is he was awarded almost $1 million. He
Yeah,
murdered 8 people
yeah,
and ends up walking away with $1 million.
I know.
I'm sure it didn't end up in his bank account. I'm sure it did go to attorney fees, but the fact that he ended up being victorious through our
Mhm,
judicial system and being rewarded,
mhm.
I mean,
Right?
he's
It's just so important. It's
yeah,
so important. He murders a 4 and 5-year-old. Were they 4 and 5?
yeah. Kimberly was 5 and John was 4.
And a
Mhm.
pregnant woman,
Yeah.
like, I mean, we've covered some pretty tough ones, but that's, my God, that's cold-blooded. That is cold-blooded, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, he had a lot of hate in him
Yeah,
for the Colhurst
right.
family in general.
Right.
He had dated Mark's sister.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that at one point in time, they were all very, very close. And now
Mhm.
he's been rejected. And so,
Mhm. He's ostracized, actually.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
ostracized. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, when he's begging for a ride, you can see his point of view, like, I'm sorry, I won't bring drugs aboard. And Mark's like, I can't take the risk.
Hmm.
You're a drug dealer. I can't take the
Hmm.
risk.
Yeah.
So I don't know that John would have seen it from Mark's perspective at all.
Well, if he
Um,
was 20 some odd, early 20s at the time,
mhm.
no, you're not very mature.
Right.
No,
Right.
you're very narcissistic at that point.
Right. Right. Sorry, the dog is hungry. She's fine. No animals were hurt in the recording of this podcast.
Exactly.
So, yeah, fascinating case. When I first dove into it, I was like, crap, what are we going to talk about? Because Peel definitely did it.
Yeah.
Like my role here is like, yes, he's the murderer, like, and scene. But I'm so glad that we had a chance to kind of discuss it and sort of try and figure out how it unfolded. Um, and it's interesting that the prosecution never. I read this book years and years ago, 30 years ago, um, 25 years ago, 2 days ago, when I was 29. I literally read it when I was 29. Like, that's how bad it is. So anyway, the book was by a very famous attorney at the time. I can't remember his name, but the name of the book was How to Argue and Win Every Single Time. And the book starts off by he's just telling stories, right? He's just telling these really kind of fascinating stories. And he's like, arguments aren't about who has the stronger argument. Arguments are won by who tells the better story.
Mm.
And if you can tell a story that the jury can see, wow, okay, drugs, we're on board. Well, shit. Yeah, now there's reasonable doubt, right? Why the prosecution didn't tell the story that you and I basically came to a conclusion, like, this is the story, this is how it worked out, when it's kind of almost so obvious, is I don't understand. How
Well,
could you be
I
so
don't,
inept?
again, they don't, I think you're taught to deal in facts, and
Mhm.
there was no crime scene. There was
Right.
no, most of the evidence was so distorted by the fire
Mhm.
that you're left with speculation. And I think trying to convince a jury to
Mhm.
convict without a reasonable doubt is
Mhm.
difficult when you don't have the solid evidence to back up your speculation
Right.
about what happened.
Right. But again, all they had to do was tell the story, tell the story.
Well, the
Um,
other thing that complicated the issue was you had I didn't put this in our narrative, but you had discovered that the prosecutor was having an affair with the judge's
right?
clerk,
Right?
which made things even, not the prosecutor, the defense, was it the prosecutor or
No, the defense
the
was having,
defense attorney
yeah,
was having an affair? So it was very incestuous overall.
right?
And
And I think that the defense attorney did that on purpose to try and pollute the trial, because if he can get a mistrial, right,
mhm,
then the state can be like, well, we only have circumstantial evidence, and this is very costly to do this again. Oh, right. So what does he care if he gets sanctioned a little bit? He's still going to, at some point he's going to collect. Um, it's a famous case,
yeah,
gets national attention. So this attorney is like, yeah, I'll take that publicity.
wow. Well, it's very tragic. And I think the shame of it is that the idea of drugs being dealt off the investor by the Colehurst family
Mhm,
taints their
mhm.
memory and
Yeah,
the good that they were
legacy. It taints
attempting to
their
do.
legacy.
Legacy, thank you. It's a good
Yeah,
word. Yeah.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. And I don't think Mark had any. It would have been far too risky for him to do that. Far too risky. He wanted to retire by the time he was 50, and he's doing so good with the catches. Right, comes in, he's
He
got a
is.
broom tied to the mast.
Yep.
He's killing it. Why?
But he also had the kind of personality that he would go to fisticuffs if it came to it. He
Yeah,
had a reputation of being kind of rough.
yeah.
So, and I think there was also the idea that he did not grow up as a fisherman, but in fact
Mm,
turned his hobby into a
mhm,
lifestyle that was very successful. I think it
mhm.
created some envy among
Oh,
people,
I'm sure. I'm
you know.
sure. And who's this outsider who's coming in and is being so successful and showing us, if you're a fisherman, you've been a fisherman for generations and generations.
Yeah.
And here comes this city slicker coming in and showing you how it's done. And he comes into port with, the Ferrari of
Yeah.
fishing boats.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that people were eager to promote the idea that he was a drug dealer.
Or you're just eager not to participate.
Besmirch his reputation.
I think that members of the town did not want to get involved in a case either way. And they were very put off by the way the police were, pushing them around, and then
Right.
the whole drama of the case bringing to their very small, tidy little port. It looks heavenly from a photographic perspective. So
yeah, it's beautiful.
I think it would have been really difficult to get a conviction despite all the circumstantial evidence. Like you said, John Peel was very lucky. I'm disgusted that he ended up, benefiting on top of a horrible crime. So, so
what's interesting is, like, yes, I didn't sit in the courtroom. I'm not a juror. I wasn't presented with both sides of the story. But in just sort of looking at the facts that we have, it's just so obvious to me. Like, there's no doubt in my mind John Peel did this. Like, zero. He 100% did this. And I don't think he did it with anybody else. I think he did it. I don't think Mark's murder was premeditated. Everyone else's was. And
the dominoes fell.
Yeah.
So
I know.
Okay. So the next 3 weeks, we're going to spend more time talking about
murder and mayhem.
murder and mayhem at sea. The next 3 cases are linked by the fact that they all happened around cruise ships. So
there's some really good ones there. Some
interesting cases, and I'm looking forward to presenting them and getting your insights around them. So
I'm looking forward to hearing them and presenting my insights to you. Do you like my hat?
No, I do not.
Goodbye. Never gets old, people. Never gets old. I don't even know where that comes from. Like, where does that come from?
It's called Go Dog Go.
Go Dog Go?
Oh. Yeah, by P.D. Eastman.
Huh. I'm going to have to look that up.
Okay. On that happy note.
I just like doing it with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On that happy
note. I like doing most things with you.
Well, okay, great. And on that happy note, I'm trying to get off this podcast, and I just can't.
Yeah. Well, when you come over on the other side, honey, I'm going to have tears of layers of cupcakes and brownies and cookies and all sorts of yummy stuff.
And I'll be like, I'm fat.
No, not over there. You can be svelte. You can be 5'10", long blonde flowing hair. You adopt whatever facade you want to adopt.
Like I am right now. Yeah.
And that's, I think just to end on this note, because we got to end it on a lighter note. That's the really interesting thing, is that the spirits that come through will present themselves in attire that they like the most. So I had a woman's grandmother come through, and she was dressed in like early 1950s, late 1940s kind of garb. And she kept showing me happy days, right? So like there was a poodle skirt, and she just thought she was the cat's meow in this, so no one thinks twice. You can dress however you want to dress. There's no judgment, which I love, because they love fashion over there. They love to look good. So yeah, I the more I do this, the more I'm like, wow, that's so fucking cool over there.
Can't wait.
I know. Don't kill yourself, people. There's always a price to pay for that. So stick around, do your work, finish what you started.
Yes.
And then, when it's time.
And do good here so you can continue to do good there.
Do some good here. So anyway, all right. I love you, Sands.
Love you too.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon. Okay. I'll see you soon too. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.